Cases at Computex 2019 range from unobtainable, like the $4,000 semi-custom cocoons, to questionable, like the $40 cut-apart 5-gallon buckets with a cloth on top of them. And that was just from one booth. The show had a lot of promising cases, some with mesh and some just unique, and we're looking forward to the industry's investment into more performance and quality-focused trends for 2019. For this video, we're looking at the best cases that were at Computex, and we have everything from standard designs to abstract or straight bizarre enclosures, with a lot of the design standards shifting toward mesh for this year's launches. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their high-end thermal compounds. Thermal Grizzly makes cryonaut paste for high thermal performance and conductivity without being electrically conductive, so you don't have to worry about shorting components. Cryonaut is particularly good for replacing stock GPU pastes, as cryonaut is a non-curing compound. Learn more at the link in the description below. As a reminder, we still need to test all of the cases displayed at Computex 2019, but this list gives a recap of the most interesting enclosures we saw at the show. Of course, until we can test them properly, we'd advise holding on purchases. Our Best of Show nomination for this year's cases goes towards SilverStone, who've reinvented their chart-topping Raven series with the Raven prototype, and the Alta, which uses a Raven chassis. The RV02 is among the top 3 cases we've ever benchmarked, released originally circa 2009, and its high performance was primarily a result of managing to cram 3 180mm high static pressure fans, pointed straight into the tower and GPU coolers, into the bottom of the case. The Alta revisits this design, with Raven tooling, but now with 3 200mm bottom-mounted fans instead. SilverStone is also moving to support the RGB trend in these fans, if a bit delayed on its support of that trend, with further trendy moves illustrated by the accompaniment of curved tempered glass for the side panel. The Alta rotates and inverts the motherboard tray, positioning the GPU cooler in a slipstream from the 200mm fans and enabling tower coolers a direct bottom-to-top airstream. This is improved with a 120mm top-mounted fan for exhaust. This approach allows SilverStone to keep a closed front panel, instead orienting its intake toward the bottom and pushing out a fine mesh filter at the top. The PSU is rear-mounted in this one and hidden, with cable management concealed by a solid panel on the opposing side. Price will be in the range of $300 with a release target of to be determined. It's not finalized yet. SilverStone also had its Raven prototype present, which should be priced significantly more affordably while still maintaining the airflow focus. The Raven prototype isn't completely finalized either, but it is improved beyond what was shown at CES. This is more of a true successor to the RV02. Finally, SilverStone earned its spot in Best of Show by closing out its stack with a more affordably priced Farah V1 case. The Farah V1 is meant to sell at $70. It will have a mesh front and apparently intends to ship with 3 120mm ARGB front fans and 1 120mm exhaust fan. We'll believe this pricing when we see it, but if they can hold it, it's a promising goal and would make for a strong successor to the RL06. The next award is for Most Improved, which goes to Phanteks this year. The Phanteks P400A improves upon the 2016 design for the P400 by adding a fine mesh panel to the front. This is similar to the Cooler Master NR600's panel, a case we recently reviewed, in that the ultra-fine approach to the mesh allows for the size of the mesh holes to act as a dust filter without needing a dedicated dust filter. The Phanteks P400A is supposed to carry new fans that are as yet undetailed, with options of blackout or RGB at either $70 or $90 respectively. The P400A is among the more promising cases we saw for its mixture of exterior design and performance, and we look forward to its release later this year. Before moving away from airflow and towards just unique cases, we have a runner-up for the most improved category. BitPhoenix and its Nova Mesh TG land on the list for this one. The last time we worked with BitPhoenix, the company had released one of the worst cases we've ever reviewed, the ENSO, which was bad in terms of build quality, airflow, and ease of installation features, but BitPhoenix has had some time to improve. The BitPhoenix Nova Mesh TG moves to a fine dust filter on the front, following trends other companies have discovered this year, although it still includes a dust filter in the front, which is probably not fully necessary. We think BitPhoenix could drop the filter to improve performance without much sacrifice, but in the very least, it's something the user can remove if the user desires. The case should ship with one 120mm rear fan with LEDs, one 120 front fan with LEDs, and a price of about $70 for the glass version or $60 for the steel side panel variant. Support for radiators goes up to 360mm in the front, 240 in the top, and 120 in the rear, with 28mm of cable management space in the back. Phanteks with the Nova Mesh TG has made a major move back into our spotlight, and we'll make sure to review this one as soon as we're able to. This is a good move by a company that otherwise demonstrated some serious design issues in the ENSO, and the ENSO mesh has further proven that Phanteks is serious about fixing its case design and moving forward with something competitive. Not every case has to be airflow focused, of course, it just has to be good enough. Thermaltake gets noticed for bringing one of the two most unique case designs we saw at Computex. Thermaltake's was the DistroPlate 200 or DP200 Plus, which is an acrylic water cooling distribution plate that has its own feet and a motherboard tray. The point of the case is to route water through the acrylic body using an inlet and outlet on the motherboard side of the case for feeding water into the distribution channels. The back has a fill and a drain port and an LED PCB, although the placement of the LEDs is still being finalized. Thermaltake is still deciding on several of the features of the case, like if it should have a glass panel or aluminum bars like the Core P3 does, but it's nearing completion on the design. The DP200 is unique in its approach to eliminate the case itself and merge it instead with a water cooling component, and we're curious to see how it turns out once finalized. Price and release date are still TBD, but as far as unique cases go, if you can still call this a case, the DP200 Plus definitely deserves its spot on the list. As a runner-up for unique cases, Aza's Pyramid enclosure takes a different approach to enclosure design. Aza is a brand you might not know, but they're a common manufacturer for system integrators like CyberPower, and they regularly make semi-custom enclosures that are partner exclusive for short periods, like 6 months. The Pyramid is a flashy case that seems to desire a place in the showroom more than anything else, using tempered glass panels on the 4 vertical faces and a centrally mounted system for maximum visibility to the components. The case uses aluminum panels for the sides and uses mounting points for fans on the bottom of the chassis, where 3 120mm fans were installed for the show, and then there's one additional fan on the top. The point of the Pyramid possesses that extra 120mm exhaust fan. It's not really practical in any way, really. Nothing about it is. It's larger than it needs to be, and the cooling is probably perfectly acceptable, but not going to be particularly good. But it can be flat packed, so that's good, and it's absolutely unique. And there might even be a table sold separately to flip the Pyramid upside down, because that was necessary. The case should cost between $200 and $300 when it's finalized. This was blamed on tariffs, although that percent change is much greater than the tariff, so we're not sure what they're doing. But it's interesting, it's unique, and even if it's impractical, it's something that's worthy of being highlighted just for being different. NZXT barely made it onto the list this year, but we did want to highlight its refreshed series of cases as they address some major past concerns of ours. NZXT receives the GN Computex Award for most decidedly average, assigning neither praise nor condemnation for the products announced, which really isn't a bad thing considering how bad some of the cases were on the show floor. When we reviewed the original NZXT H500, not to be confused with the 17,000 other H500 SKUs, we found that its negative pressure stock configuration performed surprisingly well, or at least adequately, for our test system. Adding fans to intake actually began to regress in performance for GPU thermals, and that's because the stock negative pressure setup drafts air in naturally through the rear PCIe holes by way of the GPU fan. The new H510 Elite has the same panel design, aside from the glass front, and should have the same airflow pathways and behaviors. At least it would, with the fans in the same spot. The intake remains on the right side panel, although this time it appears that NZXT has switched to positive pressure setup. Depending on the quality of the fans used, this could end up potentially worse for GPU thermals or better for CPU thermals, at least with our test platform, but we'll look at that when it launches. The case has managed to update with a glass front, USB Type-C, 2 RGB fans, and an RGB LED strip. It's the same path that the S340 Elite took for the S340. This is a predictable move and one which doesn't make waves positively or negatively, but it's notable enough to mention. Pricing should be $170 for the Elite or $80 for the H510 non-Elite version if you'd prefer something that sticks closer to the original price. We also have a runner-up for the most decidedly average category, and that's Lian Li with its O11 XL. In similarly predictable but noteworthy news, Lian Li's O11 XL deserves mention for its upscaled approach to the popular and GN award-winning O11 Dynamic chassis. The O11 Dynamic XL has more space in the bottom, better accounting for the lower edge of motherboards while still fitting cooling components, for example, and can also now fit eATX motherboards. Small improvements include optional SSD mounts on the side intake, which we wouldn't particularly recommend using for airflow reasons, but if you wanted them, they're there. And it also has pre-routed SATA and power cables for easy connection of SSDs behind the motherboard tray. These allow for SSDs to connect in a semi-hot swappable manner, but it's mostly an ease of installation feature, which is because at this point, Lian Li is refining a case that was already an award-winning case. Cooler Master and its H100 end up in our category of cases we should keep an eye on. The H100 worries us in a few ways, like the complete lack of any bottom ventilation to allow the GPU fan to take air in from the outside of the case, but it's still an interesting enclosure, and with the push of APUs in the future, hopefully anyway, this could have a good place for a small form factor gaming system that might live in a living room. It's a small-ish box, sort of similar to the old Core V1 by Thermaltake, but smaller than that, and it has a 200mm front-mounted fan. This alone gets it in the video, as mini-ITX with 200mm fans are a rare combination and one that is interesting and looks kind of good. Despite the mesh front though, the power supply ends up potentially in direct conflict with CPU intake, and the video card is pushed against a steel panel at the bottom. With lower TDP parts, this should be workable, and the more interesting use case will be when Cooler Master launches its 200mm radiator to fit in the front of the case, something that they are working on. We're not sure how it'll do for performance, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye on, and that's why we're noting it in this video. The case should be about $70 when it launches. There were a lot more cases at Computex 2019. We didn't see every single case on the floor, but we saw a lot of them, especially from the bigger brands that you know, and we cut a few from the list. Be Quiet, for example, had its new Pure Base 500, which is a cheaper, finally, case from Be Quiet, and one that might interest fans of Be Quiet's cases who don't want to spend as much. It just didn't really fall in a place on this list. And then there were also plenty of cases from smaller manufacturers or suppliers even that we just simply didn't get a chance to see. If there's something you think that we should take a look at, or maybe we missed, we didn't include in this video or in our Computex coverage, please feel free to leave the name of the product below, especially if it's a case, and we'll do our best to get our hands on it as soon as it's available and post a review. We do pay attention to the comments, especially when a lot of you want us to look at the same cases, so be sure to post those because we'll actually take a look at them. That's it for this one. Subscribe for more. As always, you can support us directly at store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to get access to the behind-the-scenes videos coming up this week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.